I think we're just going to jump right into things. So, thanks everyone for joining us today. We're going over Student Leadership 101, Unlocking Your Potential, directly from WUSA. So this is just to get you some information about the roles, the upcoming election, and also how you can make an impact within the students, to within the students here on campus. And so just a little bit about myself. My name is Rory Norris. My pronouns are he, him. I served as the WUSA President during the 2022 to 2023 terms. I have lots of background information about sort of what goes on here at WUSA and then what that sort of looks like, both in terms of the election, but also in terms of governments. A little bit more about myself. I come from a small town about an hour north of here called Mount Forest, middle of nowhere. No one has ever heard of it, but I came to Waterloo because it was sort of nice and close by. Right now I'm in my 3A term at biotechnology and accounting. And so we're just going to jump right into things, and I'll be able here to answer any questions at the end if you have any. But I'm here to offer some tips and knowledge with regards to the current upcoming election, as well as other student roles within WUSA. Okay, so what is student leadership at WUSA? So getting right into things, there are many different opportunities within WUSA to get involved, to get engaged. As a student leader, you both support the ongoing operations, but also provide those key decision-making opinions, and as well as you provide your insight as a student. And so there's plenty of different opportunities that we're going to dive into throughout this presentation. These includes opportunities on the board of directors, as officers, as either the president or vice president, as well as volunteer positions, other positions like those on committees, and then as well things that work directly with the university, such as Senate. Those are just, the very brief overview. We're going to dive more into some specifics with each of those roles, but just something for you to start thinking about. As I always say, my mantra at the end of the day is always, throw your hat in the ring, get involved. I quite enjoyed my time as president, and I always say that getting involved, you get to know so many more people, you build those connections, and, it gives you something to do with, the limited time that you might not have to spend on your classes and things like that. So jumping first into things. So here are some of the roles that I brought up previously. So talking first about elected roles. So these are the positions on the board of directors, societies, and the Senate seats that work directly with the university. And so now these are the roles that are mostly going to be coming up when it comes to the current election, which is coming up. I believe the nominations open on the 16th of December. So this is your chance to put your name out there. First, you need to collect a number of signatures to be able to run for most of the positions. For most of the positions, you need, I believe, 25 signatures. Now, those are for the Senate positions and also for the board of directors. When it comes to the officer positions, so those are your president and vice president, they need 100 signatures. And then your Senate at-large seats also need 100 signatures. Societies are a little different. They each run things a little bit, differently and unique depending on your specific society. Most of their elections, however, are coming up in the spring term. So you'll have a little bit more time to sort of ponder, get out there, talk to people, and, look directly into ways that you can get involved there. AFSA, which is the Accounting and Finance Student Association, their election is coming up next week, I believe. But it just goes to show that there's always something going on depending on what program you're in. Next, we jump into applied and appointed roles. So these are your things when you're working directly on committees. These are also your WUSA delegate roles. So if you're very interested in policy writing, so policy writing is you basically set out key decision-making things that you want WUSA and then also our Ontario advocacy group, what's called WUSA, to advocate on. So historically, what this has looked like as someone who's been involved is you go to these conferences. In this conference, you'd set out some key priorities that you want WUSA to, prioritize. One of those things might be ensuring that the amount of student tuition that people are being charged is equitable and accessible, making sure that it's not too high, that it's, causing a barrier to entry for students. That is then put into a policy paper. This policy paper is then used by our elected roles, such as the vice president here at WUSA, but also elected roles across other student unions. And they go then and meet with politicians and advocate based on these key decisions that you made at WUSA. Here we also have board committees. This is one way to get involved early, and it's a way to sort of dip your toes in the water. Committees oversee very particular things within WUSA, and there's also committees that work with the university. And so these are things like your governance committee, things like your elections referenda committee. They oversee key aspects of the organization. For example, the audit committee will oversee WUSA's audit every year, making sure that we are, within the bounds of our rules set out under the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, as well as the rules defining what any other audit would do, making sure that we're, not pulling a TMU, making sure that, the money that we're spending is, accessible and is representative of students. Next, we can talk about some of the elected roles. These are another great way to get involved. Things like volunteering, that's always posted on the WUSA volunteering and jobs page. There's lots of opportunities there. Attending general meetings, this is something that, you as a student, you have a voice in this organization. And so if you're wanting to bring forward a motion or change that you want to see, this is your direct way to get involved. Our general meetings usually take place in the winter semester, usually about halfway through, sometime in March. And so this is your opportunity to be that direct change that you want to see. As well, participating in town halls, this is just getting out there. Usually they're specifically related to a specific subject, where we might be looking at getting people's feedback on the ground about different topics, making sure that we understand how students are feeling about particular issues. And then lastly, we have our surveys and consultation done throughout the year, making sure that we're keeping up to date on what students are feeling and thinking, and ensuring that we're, working to represent them in the terms of the advocacy that they want to see, and then also the opportunities and the events that they want to see as well. So all of these roles have varying different levels of responsibility, time commitments, as well as compensation. We're going to dive a little bit more into those on specific slides. But again, this is a sort of that high level overview of the positions that are available directly through WUSA. So jumping right into the board of directors. So this is the upcoming election, December 12th or December 16th that I talked about earlier. So this is for a 12-month term. And so as a board of director, you sit on sort of that very top level of the organization. You oversee making sure that the organization is going in the right direction. You do, you mainly oversee specific priority setting for the organization. So things like saying, we want to see this specific change within advocacy might be something that the board of directors investigates. You're also working directly with the higher ups at WUSA, the staff, making sure that things are operating at a good level. As a director, you do receive an honoraria. This is, I believe, somewhere around $1,200 a month, but this is to compensate you for the amount of time that you're expected to cover the role, which is about 10 hours a week. On the other hand, officers such as the president and vice president, we'll get into more of them later. They also sit on the board of directors, so they also get a vote, but they are full-time positions. And we will talk about more of that when we get into their specific section. So throughout your role as a director, you will also be meeting with different aspects. You might be overseeing different committees. So for example, if you're on the board of directors, you might not only be yourself voting on the board of directors, but you might oversee the audit committee, for example, making sure that you're going to those meetings, overseeing that specific work that committee is doing. As well, you might also be working specifically with university level committees, meeting with university members, making sure that we are aligned with our goal setting with the university, and then also just advocating for students at the end of the day, making sure that what students are wanting to see changed, both within WUSA and within the university, is being overseen and done. This is sort of something that the directors are able to do. So this is sort of because of this, directors have that little bit of flexibility that if they're very passionate about co-op, for example, then they have the ability to meet with co-op people at the university. They have the ability to sort of set what is WUSA's strategic goals for co-op advocacy, things like that. So it does provide a little bit of that fit in terms of if there's something that you're very passionate about that you'd want to see changed. As well, you do directly make an impact on student life with regards to setting the budget for the organization, making sure that, as I say, that we're spending money where students want it to be spent, as well as some of those very high-level decisions that you're going to be having to make when you're in the role, such as decisions with which regard to the bus pass, things like that. Okay. So next we have the president and vice president role. So touched a bit on this on the previous slide. So these are your full-time positions within WUSA. So these are also elected by the student body. And so there's 2 positions now. At one point there used to be 4. And so they're mainly divided amongst where their main focus is. So the president main focus is on the internals of WUSA and the university. So they meet a lot with high-level university admin. They also work a lot with internal staff. The vice president, on the other hand, they work a lot externally. So they're meeting with politicians, they're creating advocacy, they're working directly with external partners, such as WUSA, such as UCRU, such as CASA, which is our three different lobby organizations that we mainly work with at WUSA to advocate for key priorities that students want to see changed, mainly within government and mainly within the provincial government, which is where a lot of the decisions are made with regards to student issues, such as OSAP, tuition, amount of funding that's going to universities, that sort of thing. So this is sort of where my experience sort of ties into things. As the previous president, I was sitting in a lot of those meetings. And so at the end of the day, it is an amazing opportunity to get your voice out there, making sure that you're advocating on behalf of students, saying the things that you want to be said, making sure that you are that voice for students in these meetings. Because at the end of the day, that's what the role is, making sure that you're representing students and their needs. So jumping back to the presidency one, with your being so connected with the university, you'll very often sit on university level committees, such as Senate or the board of directors. So very similar to how WUSA has a board of directors, the university also has a board of directors at their level. And so you have a seat on that as well. And so you get to speak directly to the very high level decision makers for the university side of things, as I touched upon earlier, making sure you're representing undergraduate students, and then also making sure that the decisions that are being made there are taking into account those opinions. So both are full-time roles, and because of that, they can be counted towards co-op. During my year, I think the max was 8-month co-op, just because that's how the co-op system worked at the time, was you could only do a max 8-month co-op. But now they have expanded it to 12-month and 16-month. So if one of these roles is something that interests you, do know that you can count it for up to 3 co-ops, as long as that works with your schedule. And then, yeah, at the end of the day, these are amazing ways to get involved. Big time commitment, as I say, full-time roles, but hey, at the end of the day, this is one of the biggest ways that you can make an impact within the students on campus. Okay, so now student societies. So touching a little bit upon these. So these, as I say, vary very much depending on what specific faculty and program you're in. So they set out sort of those lower level events that you might see throughout campus. So these are your accounting and finance student associations. Accounting and Finance Student Association, so AFSA, ASU, your NSOC, your SciSoc, your MathSoc. So these are there to both build community within these groups, but then also to run those events and also to do other key strategic priorities that they might identify. So a lot of the student societies on campus, they run different opportunities, both through different competitions and things like that, but then they also might run things like bake shops or cafes that most of them do. So each of these societies sort of varies in their governance structure. They're each slightly different. They have different positions, roles. So it's really hard to touch upon them all as a collective, but just know that they are out there as an opportunity to get involved. This is another way that you can sort of dip your toes into making those decisions, getting involved, representing students without having to make that potentially big jump right to WUSA. But either option is always available. I sort of took that big jump to start off with, and now I'm working my way back, and just know that either way is completely valid. Okay. And so, yeah, this is a great way also to build that connection with your peers, and then contribute to the, general vibe on campus. So now we're talking about some of those other roles that I haven't been able to touch upon yet. So volunteering and applied roles. So these are the ones that you'll be able to find on the WUSA website. They do, vary throughout the year. So making sure that you're checking regularly to see what's available is something that you should probably do. So these include, things like your bike. Trying to remember them all off the top of my head now. It's been too long that I've been out of the role. But your bike center, all of your different services roles. So your Women's Center and your other roles that might exist there. So these are all awesome ways to get involved. Next, we can look at the seats for the Senate positions. So the Senate, as I touched upon earlier, that's sort of one of the decision-making bodies that the university has, very similar to we have the board of directors. They have a Senate. And so this Senate is very academically minded compared to their board of directors, which makes more of the governance decisions. The Senate makes the academic decisions for the organization. So they oversee things like specific program offerings, making sure that students are getting the specific courses for the programs that they're taking. But they also right now are overseeing a lot of the budget concerns that the university has been going through. If you haven't been sort of keeping up with the news recently, the university has announced that they've been running a huge deficit this year of $75 million, which is only projected to grow in the future years. So that's something that they've been really working hard to address. But as your student, if you were interest in this sort of role, you would be there representing students, making sure that their voices are heard with regards to particular academic issues, but then also concerns with regards to the budget situation. Next, we have at-large seats for WUSA. This is more with regards to the WUSA delegate positions. So WUSA has these, as I talked upon earlier, these GAs, what they call, or General Assemblies. They have them twice a year, once in the spring and once in the, once in the winter and once in the fall semesters. Most universities, right, they don't have a spring semester, so that's why they have those two throughout the year. And so this is your opportunity to, as I say, go out and create specific policies with changes that you might want to see. So touching upon one earlier where we talked about tuition, another one that we most recently talked about at the most recent GA was food insecurity, making sure that we're going to the government and asking for particular programs. And that way, when we have an organization like WUSA, we can align all of our priorities across the board. So it's not then WUSA going out and asking politicians and then McMaster Student Union going out and asking politicians. It's instead a whole body representing all the undergrad students across the board, and then going to politicians and saying like, hey, we're all asking for the same thing here. It's really important to us, prioritizing, the different things and making sure that we can make that impact at the end of the day. Lastly, when we come to sort of those board committees and student-run services, which I touched upon earlier in the volunteer and applied rules, they're both paid and voluntary. It depends on the opportunity, so making sure you're reading about that beforehand. And then, for the majority of these roles, training is provided, which is something we will touch upon later. But just know that you're not going to be going into any of these roles completely blind, not knowing what's going on. You will be provided with that background information, making sure you're fully filled in with the context of what has happened before, but then what is also planned for the future. Okay, so preparing for nominations. So this is something that can oftentimes be very nerve-wracking. Touching upon my time when running for president, that was something that was, very nervous to me, was, going up to people and like talking like, hey, like, do you know what WUSA is? Like, are you going to vote in the election? Like making sure that they're up to date on what's going on. That's something that, at the end of the day, you do need to sort of work on. It's a skill at the end of the day. And so making sure that you're working on improving when both your public speaking and then also, speaking with people in particular. When we talk about some of these other skills like budgeting, research, and data collection, a lot of that will be supported through the training that's provided to you, whether you're running for the board of director position or an officer position, or you're running for one of the other positions outlined. There are those things set in place to make sure that you do have the information and the skills available to you. Next, when it comes to setting up your candidacy, you want to know sort of what are your priorities? What are you running on? Well, like, why should students vote for you over other people who are running? And so it's important that you sort of have in your mind, like, these are the things that I want to see changed or improved, and making sure that something to maybe consider is what are the steps that I'm going to have to take when I do get into the role to be able to see this come to pass? Making sure that you're not making promises that you can't deliver on is something that's very important. At the end of the day, you are almost a politician in that way, that you have to be mindful of when you're speaking with people, making sure that you're setting out the correct priorities and you're making sure that you're meeting people where they are. Next, when it comes to a lot of these positions, you will be having to collect signatures, as I touched upon earlier. So most of these positions require 25 signatures, while those officer positions, so the president and vice president, require 100. That's something that I think people are often scared at the time, because 100 people, particularly for the officer roles, is a potential challenge. But I will say, like, honestly, at the end of the day, like, if you go up to people and talk to them for a little bit and, say, this is why I'm running, these are the things that I want to see change, people will sign for you. So don't feel discouraged by that. I remember that when I finally decided I was going to run, it was the middle of winter, and there was this huge snowstorm that sort of wiped out all the classes. So all the classes had been canceled for the day. And I was still living in V1 at the time. So I went out to the V1 common area, and people were just, gathered, hanging out, enjoying the fact that they didn't have classes. And I just, talked to people. And that's how I ended up being able to collect my 100 signatures, was just going out there, meeting new people, and at the end of the day, making sure I was, trying to align my priorities with theirs. As I touched upon earlier, nominations for this will be opening up on December 16th. So you can collect signatures both on the WUSA.ca or vote.wusa.ca website, but then you can also collect them on paper. Just making sure that you're collecting their name, student ID, and their student number in order for them to be counted. There are different ways of going about things, and so whatever you prefer, we try and be, as accessible as possible. And then lastly, just making sure that you're brushing up on those elections and referendum procedures on the WUSA website, making sure that you're following sort of the rules and guidelines that are outlined there. Okay, so here are some commonly asked questions that people might have when it comes to WUSA elections, and then also some of the other roles that are, we've been talking about throughout this presentation. So what are the requirements to run? So generally speaking, for most of these positions, the requirements are just that you're an undergrad student here at the university and you've paid your WUSA fees. Particular societies might have different rules, like you can't run for Eng stock if you're a math student. But besides that, generally speaking, there aren't that many requirements, just making sure that you are collecting those signatures and meeting the requirements as outlined in the election procedure document, which we talked about just previously. How competitive is the election process? And at the end of the day, this is really going to depend on the specific role that you're interested in. Generally speaking, the director positions are the most competitive historically, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't give them a try. Generally speaking, other positions like senators and officer positions have been slightly less competitive. And then for the societies, it all really depends on particular years and things like that. But generally speaking, at the end of the day, as long as you show your willingness and drive, I think that you're able to be able to do the role. Okay, so what kind of training or support is provided? So speaking specifically about the training and support that's provided for the board of directors at WUSA. So if you are elected to either the board of directors or to the officer position, so you're president or vice president, you will be provided with 3 days of training. This includes everything that you need to know as a board of director, making sure that you're up to date on your requirements, both legal requirements in terms of what is your fiduciary duty to the organization, as well as training with regards to budgeting, what the org structure looks like, what are the different roles and services that WUSA offers students, because at the end of the day, it is a big organization. There are a lot of moving parts, and so just making sure that you're well informed and up to date about that information is important to have. But training is 100% provided, and throughout the year, you'll be constantly given support from the full-time staff at WUSA, but then also from your returning directors and officers as well. So what is the time commitment looking like? So again, this will vary quite a bit depending on the role. So your full-time positions, so your president, vice president, or your officer positions, as I say, they're full-time. Generally speaking, in my time as president, I probably average 60 hours a week, just between meetings and doing other commitments in terms of report writing and things like that. I don't say that to scare anyone off. Just know that it is a big time commitment for those roles, given that there are lots of things to do in the day and just not enough time. When it comes to the director positions, it's around 10 hours a week is what they project. But again, this could vary from week to week. Traditionally speaking, you might be busier at the start of the semester when you're dealing with things like the WUSA Carnival, where you might come out and show your support and help run the thing. But then other weeks it might be slower. So it really can depend. For your things like your Senate, where you're working directly with the university, or you're sitting on a committee, for example, within WUSA, those are probably the least. You might spend maybe about 10 hours a month on average, with that varying throughout the year. And generally speaking, the only thing with those is that most of the time the meetings with the university will take place during the day, so 9 to 5. Conflicts with class schedules might be the only thing to keep in mind for those. But yeah, it really does depend. And at the end of the day, for most roles, it's a little bit flexible in terms of that commitment. That is except obviously for the officer positions, with the expectation that they are in the office for, the majority of the time. Are there any additional perks? Again, at the end of the day, this does vary a little bit by role. So board of directors and the officers, in addition to the honoraria that board of directors get and the pay that officers do get, they also receive additional benefits such as a wellness benefit. So this can go towards things like new headphones, getting a massage, something that's small to support you in your role, making sure that you're feeling comfortable, making sure that you're not burning out. On top of that, there are discounts available for the WUSA stores, so Flockstop, Chaska, Smash Bites, depending on what role you are. I think the board of directors as well as the officer positions will get that as well. When it comes to the other positions, most of them will give away, free swag. Free food is usually a big perk for a lot of the roles. So it really does depend, again, a little bit on the role, but there are obviously additional perks available, as well as the opportunity to give back to your fellow students and making sure that you're, making WUSA and the rest of the community a better place. And so how does the board make decisions? So at the end of the day, the board makes decisions as a collective. So each person on the board So there's 11 board members plus the 2 officers, so 13 people in total. You each get 1 vote. At the end of the day, if board makes a decision, let's say that board is in favor of cats over dogs, then that is a decision that must be stuck with by WUSA until such a time as the board chooses to change its mind or make another decision. So this can obviously potentially scare off people who have a feeling like if you're really a real dog lover, and what does it mean if my organization has now said that we like cats more than dogs, despite the potential hilarity of that situation? It is important to remember that as a board, you've made that decision. And so it's important that you don't go undermining that decision that board has made, just making it clear that the board has made X decision. Though I may personally disagree with it, that is a decision that has been made. So those are some of the commonly asked questions. And then now we just quickly want to touch upon some of the other resources and links that are available to you. Most of these can be found on the WUSA website. So just, take a little bit of peruse through there. I would recommend taking a quick read through all of them. Some of them are a little bit long when it comes to some of these, so don't take that as a sign or a barrier. Hopefully, just take that as a resource that's available to you if you feel so inclined. These are all sort of talking about ways that you can get involved, and then also just a little bit about the elections as well. Okay, and so now I'm going to open it up to any questions that people have out there. I don't know if I can see the questions on here. Sounds good. If you do think of any questions, please feel free. Oh, someone is typing. Ooh, experience. So I'll read the question. Could you speak a bit more on your experience and your favorite moments working in a WUSA role at leadership role at WUSA? That's a good question. So I was president for 1 year in the 2022 to 2023 term. Amazing opportunity. Got to meet with many amazing people, both here at WUSA, but then also across the student union landscape, including colleagues at many different organizations. I think when reflecting upon sort of what my favorite moments working at WUSA was, I think there are some really interesting people that I got to meet through WUSA. So meeting previous executives who came in the role before me, getting to know them was something that I really enjoyed. But then also sort of in the role, I also got to meet various politicians, sort of talk to them about key student matters and issues that I wanted to see addressed. And so because of that, I think that was an opportunity that I wouldn't have been able to get if it wasn't for WUSA. And so those are sort of the key things that are immediately jumping to mind in terms of things that I really appreciated about the role. But I know that's not necessarily for everyone. And so there's definitely many different things, throughout the role that I would also reflect upon, highly after my time as president, including the, opportunity to sort of get to see the inside information. I like this again might not be for everyone, but just seeing sort of like how things are run behind the scenes has always been something that sort of fascinated me, and sort of learning more about how things operate, both within WUSA, but more interestingly, the university. Like, how are the decisions that the university is making being made? Has something that I have found really fascinating. At times also very frustrating with regards to how long it takes them to often make decisions or change, because at the end of the day, they are a little bit locked into the way that they have done things historically. Not to say that that's a bad thing, but they do like to sort of keep on a steady path in terms of keeping it the way it has been rather than making new decisions or setting new priorities. Okay. So next question, what are the biggest tasks board members spend their time on? So the biggest task I would say that board members spend their time on would be the meetings that they're expected to take. So these are not only your board of director meetings, which takes place about once a month, but then also your committee meetings, which can be split between WUSA-specific committee meetings and also University of Waterloo-specific committee meetings. Generally speaking, you're expected to read the agenda beforehand. So the agenda is just like a document that goes out before the meeting, basically outlining what you're going to be discussing in that meeting in particular. In the agenda, they also might highlight any, reports, information that's, you should know before the meeting, as well as any key highlights that they want to communicate beforehand. So making sure that you're reading that ahead of time, understanding the information outlined, and then coming prepared with any questions that you might have for the people presenting, any questions that you might have for your fellow, people sitting around the table with you, is probably something that takes up the majority of your time. But then again, it can also vary. As I say, board of directors often volunteer to help out at different events, such as the WUSA Carnival. And so times like those, like that week in particular, you might be spending more time, helping out running events, meeting people, shaking hands, rather than on other things like governance. But it can really vary depending on the specific person, what they feel most comfortable with, and what they want to prioritize during their time in the role. So next question we have is, what supports are in place to fill in skill gaps for board members? If I am not good at understanding an accounting spreadsheet or knowing if a budget is a good or bad one, how effective can I be in that role? So yeah, so this is something that I think we've talked about a little bit during our training piece, but I'll also expand upon here. So again, it's important to know that you don't have to come with every single skill. You don't need to be some supernatural human who knows everything and who has absolutely every skill available to you. The training that is provided to you is there to give you that initial understanding to support you. But then also there's the experience around the table that you can draw upon. So maybe you might not understand budgets 100%, but there are other directors around the table who might be in other positions or other classes at the university where they've sort of learned some of these skills. And as well, we always have the full-time staff at WUSA here to support you if you do have any questions. Like if you're in a university meeting with, the Dean of Arts, and they're talking about some of the programs that they're dealing with or some of the advocacy issues that they're dealing with, there are full-time staff within WUSA that you can then touch base with to talk about some of those specific advocacy topics to make sure that you're understanding fully what is being discussed and making sure that you're fully understanding sort of what the connection points potentially may be between us and the university. So don't feel that because you don't have a grasp on certain skills doesn't mean that you can't succeed or thrive in this role. I would say, it's important to come to many of these roles with an open mind and making sure that you are picking up on those skills because, we are here to also provide that support and training. And that's something at the end of the day, that's also a benefit to you that you can take, beyond WUSA, beyond whatever these roles are, to both the job market, but then also, any other way that you get engaged, both within the university and then also in your community. Okay. What does the board make decisions based on? Is it simply a collective decision based on every person getting one vote, or does decision-making need to follow any guidelines or system? So the board of directors, their meetings are governed by what is called Robert's Rules of Order. So Robert's Rules of Order is a governance procedural document that sort of outlines the ways in which decisions are made. Not to jump too much into things, but the way that document works is, generally speaking, in order for a decision to be made, it first has to be put on the table by someone or has to be moved. And the way this works is very often it will be moved by the chair. In the case of WUSA, the chair is the president. They oversee the meeting. They sort of are also in charge of the running of the meeting, and they sort of hold the votes and they do the counting throughout the meeting. And so if you had trying to just think of something here, if you had a vote coming towards board where you wanted to, I don't know, if you wanted to, let's say, make a new advocacy goal of increasing the amount of cats on campus, that would first have to be moved by the officer, or it can be moved by anyone, but most likely it would be moved by the chair, so the president. Someone would second it. If you second it, you're basically saying, I want to discuss it. And then it would be open for anyone to discuss. At which point it often goes back and forth between different sides, depending on the issue. And then from there, you might either call the vote, saying, if you're in favor, raise your hand, or it might go to, okay, maybe we need to reflect a little bit more upon this. Maybe we'll table this, we'll set it aside, and we'll come back to it at a later time. So it depends on the situation, but there are different opportunities and different ways in which that these things can happen. But generally speaking, at the end of the day, everyone does get a voice around the table. Everyone has that one vote, and so it's important that when you get involved, that you know take advantage of that fact. Like you're here for a reason to give your voice, and it's important that you speak to different things. Not to say that you have to speak to everything, but just like if you have thought on a particular issue that you want to be heard, that you do speak on it. Okay, and then on top of that, they also, we can rely a lot on the supports around us. Just touching upon that again, full-time staff are there to answer any questions that we might have. And particularly when it comes to those decisions that board is making sure that we do, consult with full-time staff to get potentially that history of previous decisions that have been made, but then also other factors that we might not as students consider, but which should be factored into a decision, such as the budget, for example. It's important to remember not only sort of how the budget got to where it did in terms of it's already been passed through many hands and many people have looked at it throughout the WUSA organization, making sure that they've highlighted things that we've already said we're going to prioritize, but then also making sure that that is, addressed accordingly in the budget. Okay, next question. Do board members ever work directly with students? Generally speaking, it depends on the specific director and sort of what they've chosen to prioritize during their time. The ways in which you would work directly with a student would be on things like your committee meetings. At the end of the day, like pretty much everyone who sits on a committee is a student. So if you are chairing a committee, such as the governance committee, you will be meeting with other students, sort of highlighting their potential concerns or things that they want to see changed. You also will be dealing directly with students when there's things like town halls that take place. As a director, you're often encouraged to attend, in which you would talk to students, hear their concerns. Another very common place this would take place is that when you're doing boothing in the SLC, where the directors will sit in the SLC with a board or poster, basically calling students to come up and talk to them, and they might talk about a range of issues depending on what we are prioritizing at the time. Most recently, there's been lots of talk about the co-op fee increasing, and so there's been lots of opportunities for directors to work directly and meet with students by boothing in the SLC. And that's sort of the main ways that you'll work directly with students. But at the end of the day, you also have that opportunity as a student yourself to be connecting with others through clubs, societies, any other ways that you might want to get involved, and that is also a way that you can bring back to the board thoughts and opinions that might not have initially been considered, and it is something that as a director is very important, staying connected, making sure that you feel comfortable speaking at the board, but also making sure that you're connected to the students who surround you. I'm not seeing any more questions now, but if you do have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to me or anyone else here at WUSA. There is a question box on the WUSA website to reach out, and it'll get filtered and sent to the specific people in WUSA who can best address your question. Else, I am also available. My email, I don't know, I don't think it's still on the website, but it's Ramnorri, RAMNORRI @wusa.ca if you want to get in contact with me directly.